Salam. Papa? Salam.
Sweetheart, how are you?
Receiving the diagnosis of cancer was a shock to me. I felt healthy. I didn't have any symptoms. I had just gone through a regular annual test, and to my surprise, my diagnosis was cancer. And I remember talking to the doctor, my husband and I sitting there, and as he's talking about my prognosis and the plan to move ahead, I wasn't listening to him. I was seeing my life flash before my eyes. I was thinking of my mother, that she was the same age as I was at that moment when she died. And I was at the same age getting the diagnosis of cancer. And I remember thinking, really, God, me? After everything we've been through, my mother, I have a family to raise. I have an amazing husband and 3 children. We've built a beautiful life together. I was so confused and scared. And I quickly came back into focus and heard the last few words of what he was saying, but I was scared. And I remember leaving that doctor's appointment, and my husband and I we kept holding each other's hands and hugging, and he just kept saying, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this together. And for the first few weeks after that diagnosis, I was scared, and I didn't know what the plan was. But I quickly was able to rest in the promise that I have in God, and I knew that He had a plan for my life. And so we went to doctor's appointments and met with an oncologist and made a plan, and I eventually had surgery to remove the cancer, and I stepped forward in faith. And although I knew that I couldn't have any more children, God had put on my heart that He wanted us to have another child. And I just knew that He was going to fulfill that promise. And I didn't know how, but I knew He was going to do that. And so I really just focused on, at that point, of getting better and focusing on my future and focusing on what God says about me, and that I was made in His image and that He had a beautiful plan for my life. And after the surgery, I remember laying in my hospital bed, and God put on my heart, you're going to have another child. And I remember thinking, I was just given the news that I can't have any more children. How is that even possible? But He quickly led me to adoption. And I sat in my hospital bed and I started researching what God had put on my heart. And I knew in the moment it sounded crazy. It sounded unfathomable. I couldn't accomplish anything like that. I wasn't able to have more children. And who would give my husband and I a child? Because I had a diagnosis of cancer at the time. But I kept going, and I started calling adoption agencies, one after another. And as each one of them turned us down and said, because of your diagnosis, you won't be able to ever adopt, it inspired me to keep going. I knew what God had put on my heart, and I was going to push through until I got it. And I finally got one adoption agency to agree to at least look at our application if we could give them a doctor's note that expressed that I would have a future, that I had a clean bill of health, and that the cancer had been removed, and that we were appropriate people to adopt a child. And within 10 months, we were traveling to Ethiopia to adopt our beautiful little girl, Gracie. And, just looking back on that experience in my life, I don't know if I ever would have quieted my heart, quieted my mind enough to hear God speaking. I was so busy, with my family, with working and, living, that I wasn't necessarily listening to what God had for me. I had a great plan for my life, and I was, in my mind, doing wonderful. And I had a great life. But, God will take some of the scariest moments and the moments where you feel like your life is spiraling out of control, where you see your life flash before your eyes, to speak His sweetest blessings and His dreams for your life into you. And we just need to quiet our heart and quiet our soul and our mind to be able to hear Him speak to us. And it's through that experience that I was able to hear Him speak to me. And Him giving me the strength and the faith to step forward when all of the odds were against me. To take that step of faith so He could bless my husband and I with one of the biggest blessings that has ever been given to us, our little girl. And it's through us persevering and just going to God in prayer constantly, every day, just giving everything to Him and saying, you know, God, this is yours. If this is your plan, we're stepping in line with you and we're agreeing with what you say about us. And looking at that whole situation and us adopting Gracie, there's absolutely no way that we could have done that on our own. It had God's handprints all over it. We were able to step in line with His dream for our life. It took a step of faith from us because God calls us to amazing things. He puts beautiful visions and dreams on our hearts, but if we don't respond and we don't take a step of faith, His dreams can't be accomplished. So the power in that is when He calls us and we step forward in faith, that's when He goes to work. That's when the real power happens. When you match God's will in your faith, you can accomplish anything.